Bruchim Habayim, welcome everyone. We are continuing Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, the halachot of Shabbat, and we are starting Siman Resh Nun Aleph today, and after Zayin Amud Aleph of the regular Prince of Mishna Berura. Shelo la'asot melacha be'erev Shabbat min ha'mincha u'l'ma'ala. Restrictions, against working on Erev Shabbat. I have a job, 9 to 5 job. Can I work a 9 to 5 job on Erev Shabbat? Or maybe I should come home earlier. Now, of course, people who are forced to work for a company, it's a different set of laws than a person that's self-employed and he really sets his hours himself. We are generally speaking going to be talking about a person that has the allowance of setting his own hours. What says the Shulchan Aruch, and this comes straight from the Gemara in Masechet Psachim, the Sugya of Bnei Bishan, in Daf Nun Amud Aleph, on page 50 of Masechet Psachim. The Gemara discusses the subject of working on Erev Shabbat. Is that aligned with preparation for Shabbat and Kavod Shabbat, or maybe that is considered taking away from the opportunity of preparing for Shabbat? Says the Shulchan Aruch, "Ha'oseh melacha be'erev Shabbat min ha'mincha u'l'ma'ala eno ro'eh siman bracha." The Gemara says a person that works on Erev Shabbat from the time of Mincha and on, he will never see bracha from that money that he makes in that period of time. In other words, it's not asur, essentially, but there's no bracha in the money that you make on Erev Shabbat after the time of Mincha. Now, what is the time of Mincha? So it says, the Mishna Berura, first of all, now, this that we mentioned, the Gemara says that Bnei Bishan, their fathers, they had the minhag not to work on Erev Shabbat, period. They were wealthy, they didn't need it, and as means of respecting Shabbat, they had the minhag not to work. And their sons, who were not as wealthy, they came to Rabbi Yochanan to ask whether or not they could null that minhag and go back to work. And that becomes a platform for the sugya of minhage isur, minhage avot. But it's not so simple if it would be mutar to work on Erev Shabbat altogether. It is, halachically speaking, considered asur, but not just like other isurim of the rabbinic prohibitions that you have across the board. This is, for instance, if you do a isur, the Rabbanan, you will be lashed, makad mardut, right? It's a serious transgression. This is not one of those that you will be punished for it if you do, but nevertheless, it still will be something that we deal with it as a level of isur. Now, the Mishna Berura writes over here, depending on which mandamar in the Gemara you learn, the Mishna Berura says, still there is a prohibition over here. And he says basically it is asur, it's just that you don't get lashes on it, and you will still have to stay away from it as much as possible. Now, the Shulchan Aruch himself contradicts himself in two places, because Maran writes in Bet Yosef at the end of Siman Tafkuf Pehei that there's no isur, it's just that there's no Siman Bracha. And Chaobadia deals with this in his tshuvot as well. And also, you have to note that Shulchan Aruch is a summary of the Sefer Bet Yosef. So we deal very seriously with what Maran writes in Bet Yosef, even though the Shulchan Aruch is his final psak. But when you have a clear contradiction between what he writes in Bet Yosef and what he writes in Shulchan Aruch, it definitely has to be dealt with. So Maran in Bet Yosef writes that this that Chazal say Eno Roeh Siman Bracha, it is not really asur, it's just that you don't see bracha from it. Technically is mutar, right? But then on the other hand, in Yoreh De'ah, in Siman Resh Ayin, Maran writes pretty clear that anything that you don't see Siman Bracha, when Chazal say you do this, there's no Siman Bracha, it means it's asur. So it's a pretty clear contradiction between the two places of Shulchan Aruch, and that's why I say that it's not the same level of isur that Chazal mentioned in other places. Now, the Petach Hadvir, which we just got the copy of it for the Bet Knesset, there was the Av Bedin of Turkey, Rav Chaim ben Termoli. He writes in our Siman, and he brings the stirah from Tafkuf Behei in Orach Chaim that we mentioned to Yoreh De'ah Siman Resh Ayin, and he writes to try to put them together. The Maide Chashvina le Isura eno ela linyan shen manichin oto la'asot. Says we don't let him do it. When we say it's asur, it's that we enforce that people should not be working on Erev Shabbat. That means if he wants to do work, store is open, whatever it is, in the time of post Mincha Erev Shabbat, and he says, okay, I don't care about the Siman Bracha. This is why I have to work right now. We stop him. We tell him that's asur to do it. But at the end of the day, if he went against the directives and he did it, then we can't punish him in any way, right? Because he's not doing something that is explicitly asur. Why, by regular cases of a person going against Divrei Chachamim, we would punish them. But in this case, we don't punish him. Now, Chacham Ovadia also basically says the same thing. He brings the Petach Hadvir, and he basically ends up saying the same thing, that it's not like a regular Isur D'Rabbanan. We call it Asur, but it's not really Asur Mi'ikar Hadin. It's just that we want to show that this is really the wrongdoing. Because one person does it, then it becomes just the whole dam is breached. If you start doing it, people become competitive. One store opens, it's like, who brings first. And then it completely gets out of hand. So therefore, we want this to be reinforced, that people are not working, immediately before Shabbat. We're not talking about Friday morning, we're talking about like Shabbat Friday afternoon, right before,
So are they entirely?
so we get to that in a moment. We're talking about like immediately before Shabbat, and that is the minimum time needed for a person to be focused on preparing themselves for Shabbat. Imagine a person that comes the half an hour before candle lighting, and now he has to shave and then take a shower, and he's not there to help anything with the house and with the kids, and the chaos, right? Whereas a person that has at least 2.5 hours to sit, to help, to take a shower, to get himself ready, to help out with the family, it's a different ball game. So says the Mishna Berura. Let's go to the Shcharuch itself that's going to discuss this question he just asked. Yesh mefarshim, there are those who say that this whole discussion of before mincha is mincha gedola. We're talking about the early mincha, right? Which is half an hour after chatzot. So already by chatzot you have to be stopping. Yesh mefarshim mincha ketana, and there are those who say it is mincha ketana. Now, halachically speaking, whenever you have yesh omrim, or yesh mefarshim, we go like the second one. So the ikar hadin would be like mincha ketana. Mincha ketana is 2.5 hours before before the shkia, before the nightfall, and that was, of course, very different than Chatzot, which is many hours before that. So says the Rama, ודווקא כשעושה המלאכה דרך קבע, אבל אם עושה אותה דרך ארעי לפי שעה, ולא קבע עליה, שרי. Rama says that this is also important consideration, that if one Erev Shabbat you're very busy and things are out of order and you need to work a little bit more, that's fine. We just want that b'derech keva, you're not accustomed to doing something that it takes you away completely from preparation for Shabbat. Now, Mishna Berura writes, Mincha gedola, haynu b'sheshu mechze. That's like half an hour after Chatzot. Umincha ktanat, haynu tesha umechze. That's 2.5 hours before. It's 9.5 hours after the day, which is 2.5 hours before Shaot Zimaniot, before night. V'asomech ala mekilin lo yifsid. So Mishna Berura says, if you rely on the lenient shita and you only stop working 2.5 hours before night, fine, lo yifsid. You have what to rely on. Ve'asha'ot hem zmaniot. And these are halachic hours, not 60-minute hours. So, for instance, now, that would be a chumrah, because now, deep in the summer, right, the closest to June now, will be, the day starts at 5-ish and goes until past 7, almost 8, right? So you have a minimum of 14 hours during the day instead of 12. And again, if you multiple 14 by 60 minutes every hour and divide it by 12, you'll get 70. So every halachic hour now would be 70 minutes instead of 60 minutes. So 2.5 of them would be, right? You'll add 25 minutes. Well, why do you have to think so much? 25 minutes extra than just 2.5 hours. It'll be 2 hours and 55 minutes if you cheshbon like that again. But that becomes something that you have to be mindful of as well. This is only if you're doing your own private work. But if you're working for other people, then you don't set your time yourself. In a regular case, if you were hired without any provisions to your deal, to your contract, Maran Chosh Mishpat writes in Siman Shin Lamed Aleph of Chosh Mishpat that it comes right before Shkia. You have to be working until right before Shkia for him, and you only leave yourself enough time to go home and to fill up the minimum, the bare minimum of what you need for Shabbat, and that's about it. Now, that's only if you don't have a minhag kavua. This is again a sugya in Daf Pegimel and Pedalit of Masechet Ba'ametzia in Perek HaPoalim. But that would be only if you don't have a clear minhag in town. If you have a clear minhag in town, or if you spoke it out when you were hired, you said, "Oh, Fridays I'm leaving, by midday, 12 o'clock, I'm out," right? So then, good for you. You should do that. But if you didn't, and there is no minhag in town, then al pi din Torah, you would be working until right before Shkia, just giving yourself enough time to do the very minimum preparation for Shabbat, and that would be it. So it says, what are the examples for this? For instance, imagine if you have something that goes wrong at home. Your electric system popped. You need to fix it right before Shabbat. Well, that's a melacha. Well, you're not going to do that. Of course you're going to do that. It's for kavod Shabbat. It's not considered something that's asur. Even if you're doing it mamash right before Shabbat, that would be mutar. Or if you want to wash the floors, especially in Eretz Yisrael, that they have to do sponge, and it is different than here. The culture is very different. The Metziut is very different. Or you have to, clean out the house in a way that without it would not be kavod Shabbat. and you're doing it, everyone that sees knows that you're doing it for Kavod Shabbat, that's fine. That's part and parcel of respecting Shabbat by itself. So that would be, of course, mutar. So it says the Ramah, the very last piece over here, ולכן מותר לכתוב איגרת שלומים. Therefore, it's mutar to write a letter, right? You want to write a letter on Erev Shabbat. That's, for instance, right now, our girls are in camps in the Catskills, and they very much look forward to having emails because they don't have phones. They're not allowed to have phones there. So the way they connect with their parents is you send them emails, right? So that's the modern way of writing Igeret Shlomim, like letters to people. Now you could talk, maybe writing, typing is not considered writing, and so on. In Chot Shabbat, fine, there's what to talk about. But can I do that right before Shabbat, my time, and then they'll get it Motzei Shabbat when they come out of Shabbat? All the girls are going to be getting their thing, and you don't want them to feel bad that they are the ones that didn't get a letter from their parents, an email from the parents. So it says the Ramah, you can do that even immediately before Shabbat as well. Now, again, typing nowadays is very different than regular writing, which is considered melacha. But typing is more of a machloket over there, whether it's not considered a regular writing. But certainly, Igeret Shlomim in this case will be mutar. So the Shulchan Aruch continues in Sif Bet. לתקן בגדיו וכליו לצורך שבת מותר כל היום. If you want to fix your garments for Shabbat, for instance, you just realize that your suit for Shabbat has a tear on seams, and you have to sew it up properly, right? So you want to fix your clothing for Shabbat. That's mutar the whole day. There's no restriction when it comes to that. Now, if you don't do it for Shabbat, you just find out that your weekday actually tore, clothing tore. So you want to fix it, that you should have it for Motzei Shabbat already. That, or it's not mutter. Even if you're doing it for yourself, still would be asur, right? And Maran writes that we need two criteria to be mutar. One has to be a job that is not for business, you're not getting paid for it, and secondly, it has to be for Shabbat. So those are the two criteria that we need to have. Now, can I push the button on a washing machine? So you tell me that I can't wash my clothing, right? For Shabbat I could, for weekday I can't. But can I put everything in the machine and just push a button? Is that considered a melacha seriously? Like, is it asur or is it mutar? Well, we could see it both ways, right? You could see that this is part of the takana of Chazal not to do. We also could see why it would be mutar, because it is not as involved as it was in the time of Chazal. So if it's for Sorech Shabbat, for sure it's mutar. If you realize that you don't have enough undergarments or shirt or pants, whatever it is, and you want to wash it right away and dry it right away and use them on Shabbat, there's no question there whatsoever. The only question is if it's for your friend, it's not for you, right? So even if it's for your friend, but for Shabbat, like a next door neighbor says, my washing machine broke. Can you put a load for me? I don't have enough things for Shabbat. Chazak Baruch, no problem. Even though it's not for you, you could do it for your friend, so long as you're not charging for it. It's not a business type of thing. You're doing it for him as a favor. That would be also fine. Now, if it's not so Shabbat, or you're doing it for schar, say follows the same thing as Maran that we just mentioned in Bet Yosef, then it would be asur. So either if you charge for it, or if it's not for Shabbat, it would be now asur. The fact that it's a washing machine is not going to make a difference, and it still would be prohibited, right? So says the Shulchan Aruch, v'hu adin bigdei chavero im hu letzorech Shabbat. You could do bigdei chavero if it's for Sorech Shabbat, ve'eno notel alav schar, and you don't get paid for it. So those are the two things that Bet Yosef says, and the Ramah brings it over here as halacha. V'hu adin lemi shekotev sfarim la'atzmo derech limudo. If you're writing your own chidushe Torah, so 2 hours before Shabbat you're sitting and learning, and you're writing. Well, writing is one of the melachot. You should not be writing. But what do you mean? This is part of my learning. Says Shulchan Aruch, that's mutar, no problem, right? But you cannot be copying your friend's notes for him and get paid. That's the way they photocopied things back in the day. They just paid somebody that had good handwriting to be ma'atik, they would call it, right? Ha'atakat ktavim, that you would, read your handwriting and you would write it, rewrite it again, until 500 years ago when the copy machines became a thing. Print, really, I should say, became a thing. Until then, how do you think people had Rambam? If you wanted to have a Sefer Rambam, you had to take a Sefer Rambam and hire one of these accurate writers, and you would pay them by the hour, and they would write for you, right? So that you cannot do, but for your own limud, you could do it, no problem. Mustaprin kol hayom. Now adds the Ramad, you could get a haircut the entire day. Afilu misapar, even if you are using a barber who is a Jew and he is giving a haircut to someone, within the prohibited time of the 2.5 hours at the end of the day, it's still mutar. Yesh la'adam lema'et k'tzat b'limudo b'erev Shabbat, and says the Ramah that you even should take away a little bit from your learning, but you never want to touch the learning, but even limit your learning a little bit on Erev Shabbat, Kiddush Yachin Tzorchei Shabbat, in order to have time to prepare for Shabbat properly. And says the Mishna Berura on that the fact that you could write that you could wash a load of laundry for your friend if it's for Shabbat for him and you're not charging. If you are in difficult financial situation that you don't have enough to buy food for Shabbat, then you could do it even when you're charging, right? You could even charge for it. Come on, we're going to discuss this much later in the Shulchan Aruch, in the halachot of Chol HaMoed. V'adin kol ha'melachot ha'mutarot be'erev Pesach u'b'chol HaMoed mutarot be'erev Shabbat. Anything that's mutar on Erev Pesach and Chol HaMoed is mutar on Erev Shabbat as well. V'afilu yesh lo lechem, even if you have bread for Shabbat, so you say we have food. Raku sarich lesorchei Shabbat le'anego be'basar v'dagim, but you don't have enough money to buy delicacies, have meat and fish and good drinks and all that. Still, you have the heter. Gamken yesh lo mardashari. You could say that also will be mutar in this case. But other than that, if you're not short financially, you have to be very careful not to get involved with working on Friday afternoon, late afternoon, right before Shabbat. Yesh chashash isur bazeh, and this is aside from the fact that you don't see bracha from the work, from the money that you make right before Shabbat. There's also a chashash isur, as we discussed already before, the potential stira between the two places in Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So it says the Mishna Berura, this that you could get a haircut from a Jewish barber, Misapar Israel. The Mishna Berura writes, even if he charges, you still could get a haircut. And the reason is the because everyone that sees it knows that you're doing this lechavot Shabbat, and therefore it will be mutar. Now, this would be very relevant because here you have a Jewish barber, and he may be busy until right before Shabbat. Is that mutar? Is that asur? Right? So he is making money, but he is doing it for Sorech Shabbat of these people who didn't get a chance to get a haircut prior. So therefore, it's done the Sorech Shabbat and it's mutar. It's not the same thing as fixing a garment, because there an onlooker would not know necessarily that this is the Sorech Shabbat. But over here,
people will know. מה שאין כן בזה. ועל כן יש להיזהר מלגלח לאינו יהודי, but the sapar has to be careful, the barber has to be careful not to give a haircut to a goy, right? Because of the same thing in that period of time, because there, of course, is not the Surah Shabbat. He's just working for money in that case. Now, the Magen Avraham brings from Kitvei Arizal that the Ari Kadosh was careful not to get haircut after Mincha, after Mincha, even on Erev Shabbat. Even on Erev Shabbat, he would not get haircut after the time of Mincha. And if the Rosh Chodesh falls to be Erev Shabbat, then according to the Mekubalim, you don't get haircut on Erev on Rosh Chodesh itself. So therefore, you don't do it on Erev Shabbat. You do it on Thursday in that case, right? That's based on Rabbi Yehuda Hasid, really. Now, if you do the haircut on Thursday, you want to do it before Chatzot, because again, Erev Rosh Chodesh, you want to get it done before Chatzot Hayom as well. Now, Havadia does not necessarily subscribe to this whole thing. He says that there are those who are careful not to get a haircut on Rosh Chodesh because of the tzavaot of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid, right? But at the same time, many people don't concern themselves with the tzavaot of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid. There are many tzavaot. You can't name your sons Yehuda or Shemuel, which that already people say that he meant it only for his own direct descendants, not for everyone else. But the way you cut your nail is different. The way a lot of things that you can or cannot do, and again, Maran Chida writes that some of them are important to keep, but generally speaking, the Nodab Yudah and many others seem to not be so concerned with the details of the commandments, the directives that are mentioned in the will and the tzava'ah of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid. Haravadia writes that if Rosh Chodesh is on Erev Shabbat, you could get a haircut, no problem. You don't have to be concerned about this tzava'ah of Rabbi Yehuda Hasid, unless again your family has a clear minhag to keep those. So says the last piece over here in Mishna Berura. ובערו כוונתו דמה שכתב אחר מנחה, this that Arizal would not do after מנחה, היינו, אחר שכזמן מנחה. When the time of מנחה already has arrived, אבל לא מהירי שיתפלל מנחה, not that he already davened מנחה. We're talking about time of מנחה, והיינו דקאמר אפילו בערב שבת, רוצה לומר, לא מבעיה בכל קודם שיתפלל מנחה, אלא אפילו לצורך שבת שהוא מצווה, still did not do it, גם כן לא היה מגלח, אחר שהגיע זמן מנחה ולא יתפלל. והעולם שאינם נזהרים בזה, the reason that people are not careful in this, says the Mishna Berura, even if after the time of mincha has arrived, mincha ketana, the later mincha, which is 2.5 hours before night, יש לומר דכיוון שקוראים לבית הכנסת, לא חשינן שיעבור על ידי זה זמן התפילה. We're not concerned that you're going to get fatumul and get involved too much and you're going to miss mincha, because there will be in the time of Chafetz Chaim still they had a public call for mincha erev Shabbat. In Yerushalayim now they have the shofar that they blow right before Shabbat. In the Jewish cities and neighborhoods, they had somebody that would go actually, to the stores, to the houses, and call people for mincha. It's like, time to stop, and you come to mincha, and that's what the Chafetz Chaim writes is the basis for this leniency, because people are going to be called to mincha, and they're not going to forget. Now, the last piece over here says that you should even minimize your learning in order to be ready for Kavod Shabbat. The Mishna Berura says, "Lachen en kovim yeshiva be'ezeh mekomot be'erev Shabbat." Some places they don't have shiurim on after Chatzot of Friday. Normally, right now, the yeshivot, they're said that there's no second seder in yeshiva or kollel on Friday. There's only first seder. You learn until 12, 1, whatever it is, depending on the season, and you go home. the whole second half of the day is open because because of this Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, ובספר סדר היום כתב דין רגיל ללמוד דבר שיש לו קצבה או שלומד עם רבים. If you're teaching the masses, if you're publicly teaching people, you should not stop it on Friday. Either you should have your normal shiur, and people are going to remind you that it's late for Shabbat. They'll have, how people have their ways of doing it. They'll bring my maharonim for the rabbi. It means the Sudash Yeshit is finished. Or they bring, get up. You see, people are leaving to go prepare for Shabbat. So therefore, we're not concerned about that, standing in the way of preparations for Shabbat. And that basically concludes our Siman Resh Nun Aleph, B'ezrat Hashem. And we'll discuss what things a person could and cannot do on Erev Shabbat. Can you get haircuts? Can you start the process of job that takes a long time and is very involving? Which are mutar, which are not, are the main subjects of the discussion for the next year, B'ezrat Hashem.